If you've spent even a moment on this channel, then you'll know that I'm incredibly passionate about tabletop role-playing games, storytelling games, pretty much anything that lets me forge worlds and live amongst them in all our collective theatres of the mind. That being said, it's always made a little bit easier for me to try out new RPGs because I am at heart a GM. I can assemble a group of players and do all the rulebook learning and mechanic explaining myself. I'm happy to be in charge of making up adventures and playing NPCs and all that jazz. So when it comes to convincing a group of people to play something, I don't have that additional roadblock of hoping someone will GM it for us. This can be a real problem for trying new things if GMing just isn't for you, as you're basically at the whims of whoever doesn't mind stepping up to run something, as they'll more likely pick something that they're most passionate about or just already know how to play. Times that problem by 100 if there's no one in your group who wants to GM. Whilst I think everyone should at least give GMing a go, it's not for everyone, and it's a daunting task. So enter the GMless RPG. Replace that GM role with some clever mechanics, or divvy up the GM duties amongst the group. Socialism, baby! Oh yeah! Right, that's enough preamble. You get the idea. All 4 of these RPGs run without anyone having to GM. This time I've picked out 4 games that are either brand new or have brand new additions for you to check out, so even if you're a real RPG aficionado, there might just be something that you've never heard of coming up. Teams of athletes touched by the eldritch energies of the void beyond meet on the pitch, to the screams of the roaring fans to play the greatest game of all, Antiball. Your teams have gathered at Athabasca Station for the commencement of the Tournament of Bells, an event held only during the alignment of the Chord Nebula. Untold prestige will come to the winning team as all the eyes of the galaxy are upon you. What the hell am I talking about? Why, it's They Came to Play Ball, of course, the new intergalactic sports RPG by Adira Slattery, a game full of unstable characters in an unstable world playing the most dangerous and popular sport in the universe. A game that lists Space Jam as one of its inspirations. Forgive me if I get a little excited about this one. In They Came to Play Ball, each player will take on the role of a top-of-the-line Antiball player from one of 5 predetermined teams, playing in the biggest tournament there is. The scene is Riot City, which is exactly as serene and tranquil as the name suggests. The world is evocative but pleasantly vague enough for you to shape in your own image. Enough building blocks to be inspiring, but not with so much minutiae that you're stifled in your creativity. For example, what the hell is Antiball? How do you actually play? God knows. I can tell you that there's goals and quarters, and everyone seems to be wielding some kind of sword. Oh, also everyone is apparently touched by some kind of eldritch force, that the void seems to be incredibly interested in the sport as well that you're playing. But the sport isn't the point. It's the relationship between you and the other athletes around the table that takes center stage in this game. You'll create your characters by selecting a team and following the instructions for that team. Each team is unique and has different advantages and flaws. They're flavorful but open-ended, meaning you can insert your own canon for them just like you would with the setting. You'll pick a position, some of the attractive qualities that your character possesses, and suitably flavorful eldritch mark for your team. Then you just shove all of this info on a tent card and you're ready to play. They Came to Play Ball uses a momentum system where you take or give back tokens to do things, so there's no dice required. Play uses a system from a game called Firebrands, which works almost like a stage play that constructs itself throughout the game. You'll take turns picking one of the scenes or games from the book. It could be something as simple as a press release, something more intricate like an illegal game of Antiball on the streets full of violence and high energy play, or just sitting over drinks with another player and connecting with them. Once you've selected the game you want to play, you'll choose your actors, set your scene, and roleplay. Simple as that. Each scene comes with a set of instructions with questions to ask each other, ways to move the story onwards, and importantly, things that you can spend or gain tokens from by playing out. Different teams will approach each game in their own way, with special scenarios amongst certain games that only they can call on. The Auroras, for example, show their absolute dominance as the biggest team in the game right now, striding towards victory with barely a sweat. Meanwhile, the Hellions win because rules are for f***ing dweebs and it's only illegal if someone catches you. You'll keep going around the circle in this way, playing games of Antiball, furthering yourself in the tournament, practicing, getting drunk, falling in love, forming rivalries, anything you want, and all done simply by following the rules in the book. The more that you play of each game in the book, the more familiar you'll become with them, and the quicker they'll play out, and the more creative you can get with them. Play finishes up when someone selects the closing ceremony game, and you'll follow the steps to end your story. At the end of it all, the player holding the most momentum is crowned the winner of the tournament, and you'll all go your separate ways. The winner of the tournament isn't the important thing though. It's the stories you made along the way that will stay with you in this weird and wonderful sci-fi romp. Give this a go if you like weird settings with an undertone of dark humour, or if you're a big fan of sports animes, which this definitely feels like an homage to, and shows where the characters will go through their quote-unquote tournament arc, like you may have seen in the first series of Legend of Korra. If that sounds like something you'd be interested in, this game's for you. Fiasco is a legendary name in the space of GMless RPGs, and with a brand new edition now hitting the market, there's never been a better time to check it out. You've heard of the play that goes wrong. Well, Fiasco could probably be called the game that goes wrong. Inspired by the botched crime capers of films such as Reservoir Dogs, Lock, Stock, Fargo, basically everything else that the Coen brothers have ever done. It's a GM-less role-playing game that puts players in the boots of a group of ne'er-do-wells in doomed pursuit of power, fortune, and infamy. Over a couple of hours, the gang stumbles its way through a movie-like structure of 2 acts and an aftermath. At the heart of Fiasco's darkly comic tale lies the tilt. After establishing the relationships between the characters and resolving conflicts in a number of scenes during its opening act, a complication arises that throws the group into disarray. It could be a classic case of greed overtaking common sense, an unfortunate coincidence that scappers best laid plans, or something more complicated or twisted. The players and their characters react to the tilt in Act 2, before their fates are revealed during Fiasco's chaotic aftermath. Unlike many other RPGs, things aren't likely to end well, and your character's unfortunate demise is among the more positive outcomes that you can get. Its clever structure and clear love of cinematic tropes means that playing Fiasco really does feel like directing a film with your friends. Telling the story best possible is the aim. How your characters fare, spoiler, poorly, is less important than the twists, turns, and shocks of the next plot beat. In some ways, it's less an RPG without a GM and more an RPG where everyone is a GM. While crime capers are Fiasco's bloody bread and butter, its flexible storytelling system has been adapted for a number of different games and genres and settings in its many playsets, from gunslinging westerns to classic fantasy adventure. Even better, many of these are also available for free, or you can create your own relatively easy. The original Fiasco used a pool of multicolored dice to semi-randomly generate aspects of the story, allowing the players to pick elements from tables in its slim rules. Just enough control to make the story unique without the pressure of having to come up with every last detail. An updated edition, which was just released earlier this year, swapping the dice for decks of cards, makes it even easier for players to jump straight in without slogging their way through a hefty rulebook. Just as it pulls off its tales of death, failure, and self-destruction in a way that's blackly comic without veering into icky unpleasantness, Fiasco has the storytelling punch of a much bigger RPG, and all without the need for a GM. Your characters may not have too good a time, but you certainly will. I love a good map in an RPG. There's something about sprawling cartography with intricate details and artistic iconography that gets me really excited whenever I play something. If you've watched my list of great solo RPGs, you'll know that I'm a big fan of Ex Novo and its comprehensive guide to forming your own world through play. Normally in these games, you'll start with a blank slate and build from there, your clean sheet of paper becoming a complex and vibrant history of a place that sprawls across the planes of your page over time. Beak, Feather and Bone takes a slightly different approach from its compatriots though, in that when you start play, the world is already constructed. Although the world can technically be inhabited by anything, to follow the guide of the rulebook is to construct a city of raven folk, Kenku or Tengu, corvids claiming a city. If you watched my explanation of Ex Novo and thought, this sounds great, but what if I hate drawing? Then this game might just be for you. The game comes with a lovely top-down black and white map for you to use, full of strange and evocatively drawn buildings just waiting to be explored by the group. But you can also draw your own map before you start, or pick any map you like from reality or fiction, as long as it doesn't already have text scribbled across it. Once you've got your map printed off or drawn, you just need to grab some colouring implements and a pen. This could be felt tips, crayons, or even watercolours. All that matters is that you have enough noticeably different colours to accommodate each player. Once that's sorted, you're ready to play. And play is very simple, as is usually the case in these little world builders. You'll draw from a deck of standard playing cards, and they'll give you one of 4 subcategories of building. The value of the card shows how much power over the city this card gives you. The reason being, each player will be embodying factions that are vying for the top spot in this fantasy landscape. At the beginning of the game, you'll choose one of the buildings on the map to represent the seat of power of this particular city, and at the end of the game, whoever scored the most from their card draws will be the top dog of town and gets to decide the details for that building that you all picked. That's how play works in Beak, Feather and Bone. You'll take turns choosing a building, and with your card prompt, you'll describe it and then mark it in your faction colours. Each building will be linked to a piece of paper by your faction's colour and a number, and you'll write 3 sentences to paint a picture of what this building is. Those 3 sentences are described as the building's, wait for it, beak, feather and bone. The building's beak is its reputation, its feather is an external appearance, and then its bone describes its interior. You'll carry on doing this for a set number of turns, figure out who rules the city, and then you're done. A fun little world building experience which can support up to 10 players is delightfully quick to play. And just like with the other games under its ilk, once you're done with a brand new world to explore, it'll function in any fantasy RPG. Lovely stuff. Not to mention it's really pretty and some of the art is absolutely gorgeous. You can get a physical copy in paper, which just looks fantastic and I think it's really cool, and you should give it a look. It's worth it, trust me. I'm not sure if you can tell from my accent, but I'm from a country called England. You may have heard of it, and honestly, if you haven't, you're probably better off for it. English Eerie by designer Scott Malthouse takes inspiration from a very niche genre of countryside horror that readers of the works of M.R. James and Arthur Machen will be all too familiar with. Tales of the dark spirits that corner you alone in rural England, lost in the dark of the woods and miles from any other soul. It's reminiscent of The Woman in Black and the tales of Edgar Allan Poe. Players will feel more like morbidly curious observers of a campfire horror story as they see the story of their shared protagonist unfold and the tension slowly mount over time. English Eerie comes packed with scenarios, each with their own interpretation of the mechanics of the designer's English Eerie system, which uses a custom deck of cards that can either be purchased or substituted with some playing cards to drive the narrative forward. The most important of which being the Great Ladies, a card which upon drawing will cause the tension of the story to ramp up and to drive you towards your conclusion. With the new 2nd edition of English Eerie that's just been released, there's now a comprehensive guide on how to construct your own versions of these scenarios to add to the chunky list already in the book, as well as quality of life improvements, more advice for players, and a graphic design makeover. If you're enraptured by the dark and twisted tales of English folklore and love to see a protagonist fight against the mysterious and morbid, then you'll definitely get a kick from this. It's probably pretty clear by now that I'm a big fan of horror RPGs, so it's great to see one that centers its fiction around something that for me is close to home. The misty moors of the north, the cold and windy coasts, the endless gnarled forests and woods that turn from stunning beauty in the day to a labyrinthine death trap at night. The isolation the countryside. All of that then being wrapped in the suspicion and superstition of the mindsets of rural Englishmen and women in the turn of the 20th century, a time where dogged religion slowly crept towards scientific skepticism, with the laymen of the country forced to seek out answers in the liminal space that they found themselves in. There's quite a few RPGs in modern times that have replaced the GM role with what's called an oracle deck. So this could be as simple as a deck of prompt questions that players use to flesh out a story, or a place or a concept. These games tend to be more open-ended and light on rules, allowing the players to let their minds run free, but not providing much support if they find themselves short on ideas. The English Eerie system feels more mechanical than that. There are defined characters and obstacles to overcome from the scenario that you play. There are resources to manage and dice to roll that will determine the fate of your character. You are not locked in for defeat or success, both are possible, but it depends on how your story plays out. At the end of each adventure, you'll compare your situation to those in the endgame's table, and your fate will become known to you in the moment, rather than prescribed by the game's very nature. I'd recommend this for those that have been intrigued by other prompt-based horror games, but prefer to have a solid win-loss state for their characters, like in more traditional RPGs. Thanks so much for watching this video. Plenty of new RPGs come out every week, so it's always great to highlight some of the ones that deserve a little spotlight before they're lost to the crowds. If you've enjoyed this video, then why not check out some of the others that we have just resting at the bottom of the screen for your perusal. And whilst you're down there, be sure to hit the subscribe button and ring the bell icon to get notified whenever we put a new video live. For more content like this in written form, please do head on over to our home at Dicebreaker.com and grab some merch to support the channel at Dicebreaker.myshopify.com. Links in the description. But for now, have a lovely day, and I will see you soon.